Good morning, everybody. How is everybody doing today? We are having our third gig workers hangout. Still trying to zone in on the exact times, but this Thursday morning time slot. Tried to actually get it scheduled today as well. As you come in, please let me know if you can hear me. We are going to talk about this phrase that has increased my profitability, has also protected my ratings. I use it a lot. I would use it on a full day of work, 2 or 3 or 4 times, pretty much every single day. And this phrase that I use might be a phrase that you are not comfortable saying on a regular basis, but I think if you can get used to saying it, it will really help you out. And the phrase is, I'm sorry. Now, what are we saying sorry for? Well, most of the time, I am apologizing for something that is out of my control. And that's the true secret to this. Obviously, if you make a mistake, you should apologize for your mistakes if you make it. Like, oh, I'm sorry, the eggs broke on the way here. I'll call Instacart and get you a refund. But that's not really the main thing that I'm apologizing for most of the time. So let me cover some of the main areas that I'm apologizing for. For when you are shopping, and this happens a lot, especially for late night shopping orders, it is often, I'm sorry that the store is missing so many of your items. Now, obviously, you have no control over that. And I think inherently the customer knows that you have no control over that. But a lot of times in the moment, customers can be upset because they're just frustrated that they didn't get one of their items or some of their items. And so the most natural place for these customers to vent their frustrations is on you, the driver. Now, inherently, most of these situations that are not your problems, most of the time, you can step in and say, okay, I understand and realize that this is out of my control, but you need to help the customer realize that that you are not the object of their frustration, that you're actually the one that's saving them the time from going to the store and finding that the item wasn't there. So that's one of the situations. So you go to a store, it's out of stock. If it's one item, it's usually not a big deal. But sometimes, like I had a shopping trip last night, and I want to say 3 or 4 items were just not there. And everything they were asking to add wasn't there. I had to do the thing. So I would just simply say, I'm sorry that the store is so picked over. I'm sorry the store is so low on stock tonight. And what that does is it disarms and it instantly helps the customer realize, oh, wait, I'm not actually angry or frustrated at my shopper where I'm going to leave them a 1 star. And most of the time they'll say things like, oh, it's not your fault. It's not anything that you can control or anything like that. And so that it's just to disarm customers. So what are other ways that in times that you can say, I'm sorry? Well, let's just say a couple nights ago, I picked up an order where this was an Instacart, and the previous shopper they had ordered like 4 different kinds of water from CVS. And the previous shopper, because you can actually see in the scroll if you get an order that had been shopped by someone else, they had just they had just canceled all of their previous waters without any communication, just canceled them all. Basically, they just got free batch pay. And so the order was resent out and I got it. And of course, the store had all of the kinds of water. There were a couple like size variations that had to be replaced. But I just started that conversation out with, I'm sorry you had such a poor shopping experience earlier tonight, but I'm here to get your order fixed for you and get it taken care of. So in this case, I'm apologizing for another gig worker being lazy, or another gig worker not communicating, whatever it is. Because if that first gig worker ends up not finding anything, the order's canceled, they can't rate them as far as I understand. So what's going to happen if they're frustrated with that first gig workers? They're going to naturally want to lash out at someone, and that would be the next person shopping for them. So if you get an Instacart especially, or you're getting communication through Uber or Doordash that, hey, is everything okay with my order? It's been, the pickup's been canceled a couple of times. You can come and say, I'm sorry that you've had a poor experience for that. Okay, another area. So we apologize when stores are out of stock. We apologize when other delivery workers make mistakes. Here's another area, when there are app issues. And this is kind of one of the easiest ways, I think, because everybody gets frustrated with these apps from time to time. So you can just say things like, I'm so sorry, the GPS was wrong. I'm so sorry that you have a bad address. You have to figure out ways to phrase it. I'm still kind of waking up here today, so I'm not phrasing some of these things the best way. But basically say, so sorry, I'm having app issues tonight, or I'm so sorry, I'm having internet issues tonight. So in other words, some of these things that you're sitting forward and you're like, okay, I have no control of this app. I have no control of my internet. So why am I apologizing? Well, because if they don't understand these things, they're, again, most likely to take that out on you. All right. So you can, by apologizing for these things and saying, I'm so sorry for these app issues, it disarms them. Everybody's had phone issues. Everyone's had internet issues. And when you do that, okay, this also, I would say, other things that are kind of the out of control things for you could, traffic. So let's say that there's really bad traffic on the way that you're going, or there was an accident. You can be proactive instead of saying, instead of just getting there late and leaving it. You can just say, hey, I'm so sorry, on my normal route to you, I saw there's an accident. It's blocking off the road. I'm going to reroute. It's going to take me a few minutes longer, but the indirect way is actually going to get you your food quicker. So sorry for the inconvenience. Again, it's not something that you have done wrong. All right. And I think this is one of the things that I've learned over my years of doing customer service for eBay and Amazon. So many people are afraid to say I'm sorry because they feel like saying I'm sorry that you didn't get your package, or I'm sorry your package didn't arrive on time, or I'm sorry that you're not satisfied. They take that on as some form of personal blame, like, because I'm saying I'm sorry, that for some reason that lowers me or devalues me. No, I don't want you to think of I'm sorry as something that you've done wrong, so much as I'm sorry as a way of empathizing or sympathizing, depending on if you've had that experience or not before, but sympathizing or empathizing with the customer. And again, this kind of goes back to some of what we've been developing here, this idea of we want to treat customers the way that we would want to be treated. And I think one of the biggest issues that a lot of gig workers have is they don't want to over communicate, and so then they'll tend to communicate not at all. And I think there are probably many times, I would say 75% of my deliveries, there's no communication that goes on, with the exception of Instacart, because I always send a greeting on Instacart. But for DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub, 75% of the time, there's no communication that goes on. If everything goes as planned, then no communication is fine. But once the plan starts to go out the window, so in other words, once you start waiting more than 5 minutes at a restaurant, once you know that you have to reroute your traffic, once you realize that their order's been sitting there for an hour before anyone picked it up. Now, it might be their own fault. It might be because they didn't tip. Maybe that's why their order's been sitting there. But you can say, I'm sorry that your order is just getting to you now, but I'm going to put it in my hot bag to keep it as warm as possible and get it there to you as quick as possible. And so by doing that, you are taking that focus off of you, that maybe you made a mistake. No, you're not the mistake. You didn't make a mistake by picking up their food. You picked it up in a timely manner. The fact that it's been sitting there for 20, 30, 40 minutes and no one else picked it up, that might actually be the person who ordered it fault, right? It might be their fault, but you need to take that blame off of you. And I understand that your ratings are protected to a certain extent with some of these things, but truthfully, we want to offer the best customer service experience from the moment we accept the offer until the moment that it's delivered, and sometimes even following up a little bit after that. So a couple other things that you would want to say I'm sorry for. One, sometimes I'll do this with restaurant workers to keep them on my good side, is if you see that there is another delivery driver who's being impatient, rude, mean, when you get the opportunity to say, hey, I'm so sorry that you're dealing with that. I'm so sorry that, that this just isn't, that they were being mean to you or whatever. You don't deserve that. You deserve better than that. And again, you don't control that other driver. You don't control his attitude or any of those things. But by doing that, what you do is you build some rapport with the restaurant worker. So, so like we talked about, if you make a mistake, of course, apologize, own up to it, fess up to it, take care of it as much as you can from your side. But we want to be just apologizing for things that might hurt us. The biggest one that I think I end up saying I'm sorry for, or something of the line, is just long waits at restaurants. And for me, how long I wait at a restaurant depends entirely on how big the order is. Okay, so if it's a $5 order, I'm not waiting more than 10 minutes because it's just not worth my time. But if it's a $50 order, I'll wait an hour because that is worth my time. So on Valentine's Day, I had a really long wait. It was for a catering order. It was like a $50 order, $40 order, something like that. So I had a really long wait. And so I did my absolute best of keeping that customer in the loop the whole way through, because one, I didn't want them to cancel the order after I've been waiting so long, right? Because then I get minimal pay. I don't know how much I would have gotten, but it would have been really small because most of that pay was from the customer tip. So I'm trying to keep them there. Their food's not going to be cold, right? It's just delayed in being prepared, but it will be hot and fresh when I receive it, and it will be hot and fresh when they get it. So their food experience should be good in a circumstance like that. But I'm trying to keep them where they're in the loop, not over communicating, but every 5 to 10 minutes, just giving an update, telling them not just that I'm waiting, but what I've done. Hey, I just checked with one of the workers. They're saying that they're still backed up. And whatever the restaurant workers tell me, unless I know that they're really good with times, I always add time to it, okay? And so if they say it's going to be ready in 5 minutes, 5 minutes is code word for 15 minutes. And many of you guys know that by now. Now, there's a few restaurants that I've actually talked to and I've been training them, and it's really cool to see it in real time when they're like, look, I'm not going to lie to you. It's going to be 20 minutes at best, maybe a half an hour. And so in those cases, I'll tell the customer, like, look, they're saying it's going to be 30 minutes, just a heads up. But if they tell me 5 minutes, I'm going to tell the customer, best guess would be 15 minutes. I'm sorry you have to wait. I will get it to you as quick as possible. I'll let you know when I'm on the way. And so all of these things, what they do is, like we talked about last week, right? If you want to say that we're providing a premium service, you need to be a premium servant. And if you remember that saying I'm sorry is not an admission of wrongdoing on your part. Instead, saying I'm sorry is sympathy that you are extending, or empathy that you are extending to the customer. And by doing this, it humanizes you to the customer. You're no longer just a robot on the other side of an app. You're a real person who's doing work for them, who is serving them. So in the case of this, like, I'm waiting at the restaurant for you. I'll bring it to you as quick as possible. Sometimes if I know it's a really busy time or I'm going in a really busy direction, hey, I got to get through this crazy traffic. I'm going to get there as soon as it's safely possible. And everybody almost consistently is like, oh yeah, absolutely, be safe. We understand the traffic is bad. That's why they ordered from the app. They understand that for you. And the amount of times, and I think I mentioned this last week, the amount of times that I've gotten increased tips for long waits at restaurants is actually higher than the amount of times I get increased tips when nothing goes wrong. You see, getting an increased tip when nothing goes wrong is pretty rare because you're just not communicating. There's nothing extra, right? You're not doing anything extra for them other than what they signed up for with the service. But when something goes wrong, if you can front the sympathy, okay, if you front the sympathy to the fact that, sorry, I got notifications from Instacart coming in from yesterday. If you confront the sympathy of the fact that, hey, this transaction isn't working out seamlessly, but I'm here for you and I'm here to help you in the best way possible. It's part of providing that premium service experience to them. It's also part of this idea of making sure that you are humanized on the other side. I think one of the biggest reasons why you deal with a lot of this animosity from customer to delivery driver you see online is twofold. I think one, there's a lot of poor delivery drivers out there, and it's unfortunate to say, but my personal experiences, what I see and observe other delivery drivers doing, I think our Instacart drivers are probably the best, but there's just a lack of communication, I think, that goes on everywhere. But there's just a lot of poor habits and delivery drivers who just, they're doing a job. And I understand for some of you guys, this is just a job and it's just for the money. But I want to encourage you to strive to something better, because should be a stepping stone to something more, a stepping stone to something better. And customer service doesn't go away. So like I said, a lot of this idea of just saying, I'm sorry, it was hard to get over. And it's hard for people in the eBay and Amazon reseller communities to get over saying, I'm sorry. Like, I didn't do anything wrong. No, that's not why you're saying I'm sorry. You're not saying I'm sorry because you did something wrong. You're saying I'm sorry because the transaction of whatever it was didn't go as planned. And now all of a sudden you disarm them. You don't dearm them. You disarm them. You humanize yourself. You put yourself in the customer's shoes. And a lot of times, because most other delivery drivers are not doing this, because they're not saying I'm sorry, you will reap the benefits of a higher rating, of a tip. And like I said, I don't do this for tips, but I have just seen over time and time again, when I apologize when something doesn't go well, and I apologize for the poor experience that they're having, the vast majority of the time, the customer realizes it's not my fault, and then they actually appreciate the fact that I've fronted the issues for them. Because instead of them having to wait at the restaurant for an extra 20 minutes, I waited at the restaurant for them. And all of a sudden, they start to do the math in their head and say, wow, he didn't just save me 15 minutes from going to pick this up. He saved me 35 minutes. He saved me 40 minutes. Here's an extra $5. Here's a 5-star rating. And these ideas of putting customers first are just so huge and will help you beyond this gig economy, because hopefully you are working towards developing something more than just being a gig worker, because this is very, very up and down, right? There's good days, there's bad days. But when you can start to put other people first, being a premium servant, this I'm sorry portion is such a huge part to that. So I would love to hear in the comments below, have you tried this? Have you tried saying I'm sorry? Have you tried disarming customers? I feel like the less you are just a robot on the other side of the screen, and the more you are a real human being who's sympathizing and empathizing with them, with their problems, personalizing them, I feel the more positive experience you're going to provide, which is going to reap the benefits of things that we want, like extra tips, like high 5-star ratings. So I'd love to hear your experience with that. I'd also love to know, are there other phrases or are there other things that you say beyond I'm sorry that have really helped with your thing? So I've heard a lot of people have done well with like doing jokes and stuff on Instacart and simple things. I've fiddled around with some of that. I haven't had a ton of success with that, but I would love to hear in the comments below, what are things that you do to build rapport with your customers when necessary? And again, I'm in the camp of, if you don't need to disturb your customer, if nothing's going wrong, just do the job, right? Just do the job, get it done as fast as possible. You know, if you want to leave a thank you note or something like that, that's fine. But you don't need to just update, I'm at the restaurant, I picked up your order, I am driving to you. You don't need to do all of those things. But when things don't go right, when there's a delay, when something's out of stock, what other things have you used that have worked for you? So I want to thank you guys all for tuning in. I have my first part of my ride along that came out last Friday. So if you haven't seen that, make sure you take a view of that. Probably in the next week, we're going to have part 2 of the $2,000 in 1 week challenge coming out. But yeah, what are ways that you're going to be a premium servant this week? What are some ways that maybe you can implement the I'm sorry strategy? So I'd love to hear your comments down below. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we will talk to you soon.